All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
We are continuing Memory of Light. And on the timing of this, we actually recorded Sunday for our Wednesday episode, which is going up today. And we're recording today on Wednesday for the Friday episode, which will go up on Friday. So if you were waiting for this, sorry for the delay, but yeah, life.
Yeah, the joys of fighting with your AC in the middle of summer in Texas. Yeah, have fun
Yes,
with
and
it.
that has taken up a lot of my time. I do have a PSA. So if you are working with your HVAC, so the problem ended up, so we actually called the professionals. And they came out and said, "Oh, it's the electrical relay going to the HVAC. Call an electrician." They did the not my problem. And so I went and got the $8 switch that needed to be replaced and learned an important lesson. Don't trust the people who own the house before you to label the
Oh,
breakers
geez,
correctly
yes.
because the one labeled AC is in fact not the AC. When the wire kind of touched a little piece of metal and went, "Bloop," and I was like, "This is live. This wire in my hand is live." And so I carefully, wearing lots of rubber, uh, giggity, wearing lots of rubber, got it all connected. And then I switched it on and the blower turned on. Oh, it was the relay. The blower turned on, but the condenser didn't turn on. So the blower did a very excellent job of blowing hot air. And so the air from the attic was going into the house, so that it was getting even hotter. So it was not only just a hot house, it was an oven. And so we played the little game of one person sitting by the condenser and me laying on my side because I was mentally done in the attic, sweating my balls off, putting this wire here, going, did it work? Putting this wire here. And so here's the PSA on a circuit board in your HVAC. The green wire goes in G. Okay. Follow me here. The yellow wire
Complicated. Uh-huh.
goes in Y. The red wire goes in R. Which one does the white wire go in?
It's a mystery.
There is a W, but that's not where the white wire goes. The white wire goes in C. I don't know what goes in W, and I hope my AC doesn't blow up. But when I put the white wire in C, everything started working perfectly, and it's still been working since then. So whatever goes in W, we will find out when we're doing the insurance filing for a burned down house. But there's actually no other wires. That's the thing. There is a terminal, but no, the white wire was the last one to figure out. And I actually, C is next to W. So I kept trying to like get the connection right on W because I thought maybe I'm just not getting the connection in there. And I accidentally hit C. And the person watching the condenser said it came on and then and off. And so I was like, let me put it in here. It's on again. So yeah. So C probably stands for condenser. But the thing is, why is everything else color coded and one actually labeled the thing it goes to instead of just, I don't know. But there you go. It's working again, and we'll
For
see what
now.
happens for now. For now. But also another PSA, apparently, because of bureaucracy, they're changing the way they make air conditioners again.
Oh,
So
jeez.
ours are old enough that the reason why we can't get like true maintenance on them is because they don't have any of the stuff for them
Hmm.
because they've changed the codes because the Freon is different. Well, now they're
Yeah, well,
changing it apparently like a methane based thing.
it used to be Freon, and then it changed to something that was Freon like, and then now they've changed it again.
Yeah, and this is the last year you can get the Freon like one and have a grandfather of 20 years worth of being able to maintenance this thing. And if you want to go that route, do it now because there will be 25% more in cost when they
Yep.
switch over. So I don't know how much better the other ones are. I got to do some research, but we've got like 6 months to make the change if we want to do it to the other ones. But I don't know overall energy savings. The EPA says about 40% if we upgrade from what we have to the current models, not the newest, but the current ones. The blowers themselves, in the one I have, pull 10 amps, and the new blowers would pull 2 amps. So I'm already seeing 80% less electricity there. So Our electric bills get high here in South Texas. But yeah, our main audience is in Russia, so he probably doesn't give a shit. But do we have the comments up? I forgot to bring them up.
Oh, no, I forgot to do that.
Let me pause
Yeah.
it.
Okay, speaking of our now only commenter, Scott, where you at, bro? Thank you, Vladimir Putin, for getting your teams banned from the Olympics so the US could finally win a men's gymnastics medal. Go team.
Yeah, I take everything. Not only is it just ridiculous enough that I'm not even watching it, even though I work with athletes,
Yeah.
it, it's also everything's with an asterisk because you look at the history of medals. It's USA, China, and Russia all fighting for the top spot. Well,
Hmm.
you took one of the top three out because of social. I mean, we had the Olympics in Munich during times, right? The USSR was allowed in the Olympics during times. The Olympics was the safe space for people to be human beings, even during times of civil unrest. And we changed that. And
Yeah.
because we changed that, we put an asterisk next to everything because I'm sorry, U.S. male gymnastic team, you would not have been the bronze medalist had the proverbial Russian really good gymnastics team been there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably not, you
Same
know.
with weightlifting. Same with these sports that are really Eastern Bloc type sports. Yeah, everything's with an asterisk, and if you got a gold, I hope as an athlete you're sitting at home going, "Did I really deserve that?" Because this person, if you're in that sport, you know who the best are. This person wasn't competing. Could I have beat them? I don't know.
Hmm.
You'll always have that on your conscience, and
Hmm.
it's not fair to the athletes. It's not fair to everybody.
Yep. Yep. All right. So to those comments, where are we starting here? Um,
Oh, the first one on the madness.
okay, yeah, you had some thoughts on this, so go ahead.
Well, go ahead and read it out.
Um, I thought this idea of madness that RJ came up with was ingenious. My whole time reading Rand and Luce there, and in his head, I was thinking to myself, it can't be madness. It all makes so much sense. The weaves don't the weaves work, don't they? The memories are true, aren't they? I was expecting something irrational, some sort of episodes, but it was the madness. It was both madness and true, which yeah, I love that. The idea being of how madness gets born out of something real or logical. Now compare that to how Sanderson writes Andrel's madness. That's the kind of basic bitch interpretation I was expecting.
Mhm.
Oh no, the shadows grow longer, so scary, big madness. By the way, he had a good idea for Loghain's madness, but due to how little Loghain we get, he had to go straight up tell us that he would what it was and resolve it on the next page instead of building it and demonstrating it. I suspect the idea for Logan's madness was in the RJ notes, while Andros is purely Sanderson's child. I don't even remember what that is, so I guess we'll get to it when we get to it, but which we won't today. Is I only just kind of vaguely remember that of what Ideals is talking about there about revealing what Logain's was and then resolving it on the next page. That
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's great.
let's start with the RJ World meta magic. Remember what brings the madness on is the taint, right? And we've talked a lot about the world of dreams as a hub and memories and things of that nature. And we talked about it last time with the difference between Rand now and like Birgitti, who is starting to forget things, but then he described it perfectly with it is like remembering a dream.
Mm.
And and so, but let's remember what the Dark One is too. He's also the Lord of the Grave. And his lashback is his influence on the power itself. So he injected himself into the power, and that's the taint. That was his big hurrah on the way out the door. And so it just makes perfect sense that that would actually act as a bridge to dead yous, the previously dead you.
Well, but what's interesting is that somehow we get the impression from Simmerhaj that it was very rare, but somehow it happened before the taint.
Mm-hmm.
So there was some mechanism, and that can lead you down interesting thought experiments of, well, was it then only channelers who would experience that, or would normal non-channelers experience that
We,
somehow, where you
you,
would get this bleed over
you would
and
have
the
to have a conduit.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what
And
would the conduit be, and therefore would it be possible for a normal person, a non-channeler, to have this I forget what Simmerhidge called it, when you had the a previous soul, like aware or semi-aware somewhere in your mind, that bleed over effect.
well, but also isomorphic is correct on the comparison between Jordan and Sanderson. I think Jordan in his uh educating himself to write these books really dug deep into what schizophrenia actually is, because that would be the closest thing
Hmm.
to what we see with the male madness. And Sanderson did a surface level thing. And this is a common thing. Schizophrenia is not multiple personalities and hallucinations. It is perceiving the world in a way that other people don't perceive it. And you can't turn it off. And your perception determines what you do. And so if you are schizophrenic, we take when we talk about human consciousness and perception, we take in about 16 million bits of information from our surroundings at any given time, like in any given moment. But we only process about 16 bits. Now, if you're schizophrenic, well, now we're talking about what bits are you processing. And I would love to see if we can actually measure this, maybe fMRIs or whatever new technology we can get to measure brain action, if schizophrenics are actually processing more than the average 16 bits.
This also sends me down an interesting thought experiment, because it just occurred to me when you talked about seeing the world in a different way and processing and not able to turn it off, is we've talked about psychopathy before and brain scans, and you can see that psychopathy is actually kind of a spectrum, and you can see that on a brain scan, and sometimes a little bit of psychopathy can be good, for the individual and for society. And it go back and read Einstein talking about where the idea for relativity came from. He's sitting at his office in the at his desk in the patent office, just kind of daydreaming, looking out the window, daydreaming, and he has this just kind of vision, this kind of daydream of what would happen if you started running really fast and you approached the speed of light. That sounds a lot like what you were just talking about with schizophrenia. And it makes me wonder, schizophrenia also a bit of a spectrum? And could a bit of schizophrenia then
Mm-hmm.
help you with
It
those
no no
kinds of thought
it
experiments?
is a spectrum, and I would love to see that mapped onto just perception overload in certain ways. Because what do I see if I'm looking with my eyes? I am actually technically just seeing wavelengths, but my brain puts heuristics together
Hmm.
and that's why babies are just like lost in space
You
for
know,
the first several months, because they're actually seeing the wavelengths and they're creating a heuristic in
uh,
their mind from it. And so uh it's same thing with hearing and everything. So imagine being able to still have some capacity to see the detail within the heuristic, and
and
that
we
would
actually
drive you
have an
crazy, which is
example of
what
that.
happens with schizophrenics. All the other little things that people talk about, the symptoms, the surface level stuff, usually those are coping strategies. Like
Mm.
the guy who scratches himself all the time. Well, that's because they're sensitive to everything they feel in the world, which we're always being barraged by environment. You know, the hallucinations, that's just being sensitive to things that are actually there, but you're getting them more intensely than other things. And that's going to drive you crazy. Now enter a world where there is a reincarnated soul. And Freud talked about this with dreams because he was curious about
Mm.
societies that did that had reincarnation. He was an atheist, but he was really curious about the idea that some Buddhist sects have, that some dreaming is actually messages from previous lifetimes. And so he was like, well, maybe we can tap into something. And he kind of went down that rabbit hole with a little extra cocaine and opium. But But he was also coping, and I think he was somebody who, like Einstein, would see just more things. And we see this in history. These guys were usually addicts of some kind because everything was so intense to them, and that's why they were geniuses. And I think that's what we're trying to tap that into a metaphysic here when it comes to consciousness with an in a world where we have reincarnated souls.
And an example of that we have that it just dawned on me, and I wonder if he did this on purpose or if this was just part of RJ's intuitive understanding of human nature, is Herod Fell. Go back and read those conversations that Rand has with Herod Fell, and Fell can't make the connection. He doesn't know how to explain it. You can just tell he's operating on another level.
Mhm.
And Rand is like, what does that mean?
And so when we
You know?
talk about the power, if I was to be more perceptive of, say, wavelengths of light, right? Who's to say there's not a way for me to manipulate them? If I'm perceptive to them where someone else isn't, could there be a way I can manipulate them? Schrodinger thought so, right? So it's, and he was all correct on a lot of that. So if we talk about quasars and quantum physics, if you were perceptive to these microscopic things, could you not manipulate them? There's probably a chance you could. And so we talk about the weaves. If in the case of Jordan's work, if you can perceive the pattern, could you not affect it in some way? And that's where I think the channeling comes in, is this being able to perceive and manipulate the thing that other people can't even see.
Well, and Eve turn that up to 11 in chapter 5 and 6 here, because um you get an illustration of be more than just the power, but to your point, the pattern itself, the way that
Mhm.
Brand is able to push his will and manipulate the pattern itself around him.
Well, channeling in it is explained through these books is affecting the pattern. It is using the pattern. It's just nobody's significant enough to do it except those that are special with it, which are
Yeah.
Tavaren. It's like you're able to manipulate it, but within a parameter that only affects you and the surrounding people around you. Where Rand is the biggest Tavaren since forever and the Dragon Reborn. So his manipulation of it changes everything for everybody else.
Mm.
And I got a note on his entry there that we have because I hate Egwene because we get it through her perspective. We get it through her
Yeah,
perspective,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, once again, Scott, where you at as the president of the Egwene Hate Fan Club? We need you here for this episode because we're about to get into it. Okay, moving along. Uh, Sam, I don't drink, but in Russia it goes the other way. Everything else that contains alcohol gets repurposed into vodka. My father was a senior officer in the Soviet army, and he used to tell me stories about how corruption had eaten the army away from the inside until only the shell remained in the 80s. One of which was that all the alcohol containing liquids used for machine maintenance were quietly sold off for drinking.
Oh, that sounds like it
Oh,
hurts.
yeah, that's not
Oh, I'm not even at that level.
good. Yeah. Um,
Well, my
okay.
my father-in-law, he drinks a lot too, and we bond over that sometimes. And he worked for Lufthansa, and he was the main rep to Russia at the time, or Soviet Union at the time, because it was before the late 80s. And he talked about, he said, "Man, I just developed this habit in that field because I would get there and they'd give me eggs and a thing of vodka in for breakfast, and you get used to it."
Well, why not? Um, so my point on Androl and the pin, this is a good point here, that it's such a guy moment, a gut punch of getting demoted in this almost make believe hierarchy, just a great guy moment. Men's stuff, can't help but love it. We are picking at nits here, and it's as I've said, it's partly because it's just so bittersweet because we loved what Jordan did so much, and it's just bittersweet that he couldn't be the one to finish this. But it does need to be reiterated because we will complain so much that what we're complaining about is the fact that this is good and it could have been great or perfect.
Hmm.
Because, yeah, that is a good moment. That is a good character moment. That is a good male moment that is actually enhanced because of that feeling, that connection he has now with Pavara, and so you get a bit of her perspective on it as well, and it almost doesn't make sense, but it makes perfect sense that, wait, you're supposed to be the thinker here. You're the one telling the other kid when from literally the first time we met you, you were the one saying, "Come on, guys, cool it. We don't want to start anything here. Let's, let cooler heads prevail and let's think this through." And that almost pushes him to his breaking point where he really has to struggle to, you know, not make a scene because it's not time yet. um, Another pure guy moment that I hope you touch upon next episode is how when they find Logain, you can see he's lost all his gains. Yeah, we won't get there yet. So let's put a pin in this and come back to it when we do get to Logain, which shall hopefully be next time. Um,
No,
but
no, I can speak from this from recent experience
oh
because
yeah, yeah.
I went through the thing that caused me to. I technically am still not cleared to train heavy, and hopefully my checkup next week they say the all clear. But also it was an intestinal issue, so I couldn't eat. It was hard to sleep. All of these things, and I lost about an inch and a half around each arm. That's that's significant in a 6 month time period. So hopefully some of it's the pump and we get it right back. But it's
Well,
no,
just
it's depressing and it's
yeah.
made it really difficult mentally. That was actually I was doing well mentally through the process with the pain and all of that until I started seeing those gains go away. And I was like, I've worked 20 years on those.
Mm-hmm.
You-
Yeah. Well, I finally got around to going to see Deadpool and Wolverine. So just go on the HGH diet because Hugh Jackman's 10 years older than us and he's jacked, man. There you go.
Yeah.
Problem solved.
Yeah, I do also work in this industry, and so I have to look my clients in the eyes and say, "You can do this naturally."
There's that.
I know enough
Um,
people in my industry that are not natural and tell their clients that, and then train ridiculously when their clients aren't enhanced and they're all broken because of it.
yeah, speaking of, I've never heard this phrase before, and I love this about the comment about the schoolyard fight, the stronger man versus the bigger man, the ancient battle between Jim Maxer and Jeans Maxer, resolved through mutual respect. I've never heard those terms before, and I love them now. Jim Maxer versus Jeans Maxer. Yep, yep. There's only so much you can do, especially with certain things like calves. You got small calves, well, sucks to be you because that's just
Hey,
so much genetic.
I've always had I've people a guy at Home Depot, no Lowe's, when I was buying what was I in there for? It might have been one of the other times I was working on the air conditioners. This random dude at the self-checkout was like, "Man, you got nice calves." I have pretty calves. I do have pretty. I can't complain. I'm not the guy that's
And lift crow.
crying about
Yeah.
their calves. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into chapter 5 here because I got a timer that I need to keep an eye on, and I got a lot of notes. I don't know about you about these two chapters here because there's a lot going on.
I got a lot
I
with
mean,
Egwene that I just
right
might be
off the
just
bat,
bitch, but
start of chapter 5. I'm on page 144 here, and just these first couple of pages here, to me, it's it's calling back to the moment where Rand tells Perrin there's only one side is just a disagreement on how to proceed. I feel like we get a call back to that because we're inside Rand's head, and it's probably good that I skipped over my note on that last time because I think it's more apt here, which is that Rand talks about it a couple he talks about with Perrin, and he thinks about through this chapter that he couldn't have done it now. He did what he had to do last time as Lews Therin, and it kind of only could have ended that way because of who he was, because of who the world was. And you need you need both. Um you need the elitist aristocrat Lews Therin, and you need the small town kid Rand, the literal sheep herder. Uh to get the reference I used, I likened it to the Norman Rockwell paintings of the 40s and 50s, that classic Americana, and what that was evoking so much of was the small town mentality, um that you get, the simple without being simplistic of being able to, um so one of the classic Norman Rockwell paintings is the kind of grizzled farmer looking guy standing up in what looks like a town hall meeting and saying his piece. And your we kind of talked last time socially about the communal versus the individualistic. And if you're more urban, if you're more communal, you might think, well, that's not what you're supposed to do. That's not the time and place for this. That's not the And that guy's just looking at it going, no, I'm going to say my piece because I, by golly, I want to be heard.
Hmm.
And so I'm going to stand up and I'm going to say my piece. And you need both for this to work, for not just the grand scheme of things, of fighting the last battle, defeating the dark one, saving the world, but this right here, this specific moment, is it comes from a very loose Theron place, but the reason it works, this idea of the dragon's peace, is because it is framed through the lens of this kid who watched his dad go and sit in the village council meetings and hash it out with other men to resolve their problems and keep the peace and stability of the small town. um
I did like right in the beginning there where he likened his feeling with the world at this moment
yes.
with the water bond,
Hmm.
which also gives a power element to it because that again, there's the link there. The water bond is created with the one power,
Yeah.
and it is a bridging of souls in a way. If we still equate consciousness with soul, if so you link yourself with someone else's mind and their consciousness, and now you've officially kind of linked the souls. And I actually would have loved more delving into, and actually Jordan took care of the question earlier, but into what happens to the reincarnated souls of people who have been bonded, because he answered the question uh with the fact that we don't have to deal with it in these books, in Simmeredge and all the other Forsaken, going, how did they discover bonding when we didn't know anything about it? So we don't have to deal with those souls now, because we're looking at about a 3,000 year turnover on souls. But what happens next? Lan and Moiraine, or Lan and Nynaeve at this point. What happens when they're reborn again in a few thousand years? Because we have a linkage there. Do they
Hmm.
become like Birgitte and Geidel Kane? Or is there something different that comes out of it? Or is it a nothing burger? We don't know. But I did like
Yeah.
that he connected that to the same feeling, and that gave it a little bit of flesh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It, um Dang it, cat, go away. My
There was
daughter's
one.
been.
It's probably nothing, but it
Oh
just kind
jeez.
of clicked something in my mind. But he brings up the Earth is clinging to the edge of a cliff.
Hmm.
I would have loved a little, like, reminiscing whatever did happen to Asmodean, because remember
I was
Asmodean
I was
always
thinking
said
that
that, and as
exactly
soon
when
as
I
I
read
read
that.
that phrase, I was like, that's
His story about clinging to the tuft of grass. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. That was exactly what I was thinking.
yeah.
Um, so at the end of the Rand point of view section here, before we get into the Egwene bashing, there's this great moment. So just a couple pages in, page 147. I love this. I love this line he has when he's talking to Avienda about what went wrong. Um, and and her perspective, looking back on the perfection of the Age of Legends. Um, uh, yeah. So at the top of page 147, This is Avienda. You'd only assumed that you'd eliminated war. You were wrong. Your ignorance left you weak. It did. I can't decide if I would have changed things though. There were many good years, good decades, good centuries. We believed we were living in paradise. Perhaps that was our downfall. We wanted our lives to be perfect, so we ignored imperfections.
I think this is a good little switch from what actually happens in real life too, because Rand is reminiscing on Utopia and the no wars, and we believe this was the way. And
Mm-hmm.
Avienda's the one saying, no, it's always been there.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I came across a Facebook thing one time that I think was on one of the science pages I follow, and they're becoming super woke and they're probably bot
Mm-hmm.
farms, but it was
Keep talking.
it said oh, it said what would happen
Sorry.
if the what would happen if no men were all of a sudden on in the world. And I went for the comments. Of course I went for the comments
Oh, jeez.
because and I did a random sample. There were 1,500 comments and I picked out 30 randomly. Just scroll up, hit, scroll up, hit, scroll up, hit. And 29 out of 30. So
Gosh.
this is statistically significant. This would be a p-value of 0.01. 29 out of 30 of 1,500 was some female saying the world would be always at peace and free and love and everybody would get along and da 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 da. So I like the switch here because in real life, women really think men are the ones that do all the bad things. But uh, they don't it would be that way for a second. But the backbiting and the backstabbing
Mm-hmm.
and the reputational damage and the fact that eventually someone is going to come to blows and they're going to actually be the ones that come to power. So that's just it's the switching of roles there cracked me up when I was reading that because I went through that sample on the interwebs. But this is actually part of the problem because that's the voting block that determines who's president, by the way.
Yep, it sure
Yeah,
is.
yeah, so
Um, Speaking of chicks causing problems, so then we switch to Egwene's point of
oh
view.
no, one more thing on
And okay.
the Avienda section. It's just this is just a fun one. It's 152 for me. I don't know what page it is for you, but when he
Uh-huh.
grabs her hand and he talks about the calluses,
Uh-huh.
and I was just like, oh, so no Hawk Tuah there because that would hurt.
Oh,
And
geez.
for anybody in the audience, I do this with my baseball
Some more of that.
guys. Is if you want the toughness without the ugly, hurtful calluses, get a pumice stone, 30 seconds in the shower, rub it down, and it will be just as tough but still soft. So there's your secret. There's your secret for having not man hands if you're a woman, but you still want to lift.
Speaking of not having man hands or brain or balls, Egwene and Gawain. Um, you have, my first note is for F's sake, one step forward, two back, because you have some good moments. I thought the previous Egwene stuff I talked about, I thought, it was a good moment for Egwene of the way she took charge, and when Caemlyn was attacked, the way she stepped up, and now though, I just is this just the way Sanderson is or what? But this just the opening of this scene is so obnoxious, and you wouldn't even need to change the dialogue in this scene. It's just the exclamation points, the reactions, the thinking of, for crying out loud, Egwene stop being a bee and Godwin stop simping.
Hmm.
Of uh uh First she's mad because he moved her to the tower so she could get a real night's sleep in a real bed. And then she's mad because he's sitting there, reading stuff. Well, that's his thing. He's keeping an eye on things while you're resting, and he doesn't need to sleep right now. That's what he's supposed to do. He's your freaking warder, okay? And
Well, it's fitting that her title is mother because this is the old if mama ain't happy, nobody's happy.
yes,
Yeah.
and he's not wrong. Like, are you reading it? This is Egwene. He blushed. He doesn't need a blush. He could just look up and say, "Burn me, Egwene. It's my home." Um, and he doesn't need to simp and whine and apologize because he's not wrong. It's just you can have a disagreement without being a bitch and a simp.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah, there was something he added to that. Let me find the because he's like it's my home, and then he like tries to
it wasn't sealed. I thought it's all right, Godwin. She said with a
yeah the
sigh.
the I
That's
thought at the end.
oh,
All he had to,
jeez.
all he had to say, like you said, a simple one thing here, two words. All he had to say was, "It's my home. It wasn't sealed." Period.
Yeah, or
He could yeah yeah.
even if it was sealed, I needed to know if it was something important enough to wake you up or not, or let you get some sleep because it's likely the last good sleep you'll have in a while.
Which it actually turns out to be. No
Yeah.
spoilers.
Was this? Let's see. Okay, yeah, I'll wait a minute when we get to her evaluation of Rand because I know you're gonna have some thoughts there.
Yeah, my first is when the sea folk come in was my first note.
Okay. Uh, so hold that thought because mine is more general. Is when everyone is coming in and she's everyone's headed to where the meeting's going to be and she's evaluating who's who, and who's coming, uh, and she has this thought, which is for me is on page 153. So we're several pages in here, um, and uh, it felt awful to have to consider who was for whom, but it was her duty to do so. That her inability to think or unwillingness to think like Rand of there are no sides, it's just a disagreement on how do we proceed. She is clearly choosing sides. She's not just choosing sides. She isn't just choosing a side for her, but from the very beginning, when Rand went in and said, "I'm going to break the seals," and started all this, she immediately started pushing people to sides. So beyond just her picking a side, she's trying to get everyone on a side. It prompted this thought that I'm wondering if you either have an opinion on or have actually read on, which is male versus female psychology. Are men or women, there you go, are men or women generally more with us or against us? Because to me, that seems like a very male way of thinking of you're with us or against us. But
Overtly or covertly. That's the difference.
well, there you go.
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
difference. Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, no, they're equally so,
Yeah.
but one does it overtly and one does it covertly. So
Mm-hmm.
like the game of houses in Carhine, that's a very feminine perspective on a lot of things.
Mm.
Whereas the Two Rivers way, being blunted in the face is a lot more masculine. The fight we see some of this here, Tyr and Ilian. It's a very masculine posturing
Mm.
that they have. But well, I'm going to set this undertone here that Egwene's doing between them is a very feminine point, which in that case will give it a positive because she brought two countries that are at war with each other together on one goal. But when it comes to this whole meeting, she's the one that's fucking everything up because she's the one that's basically pitting this person against this person to make sure they're on her side.
Mm.
And
Mm.
that was my second note after the Sea Folk. But who is for who, in quotes, versus Rand, everything will be united. There actually would be very little for who, and we get it from her own mind here. There would be little for who without Egwene's machinations.
Mm. The payoff here, though, is that I will gripe a little bit later about how it's done. That for some this might be a plot hole or a contrivance, but this has been Egwene the whole series.
Well, and let me do my Seafolk comment because the quote is Siren comes up to Egwene, "Did you invite the Seafolk?" And her answer was in her I thought there would be very little chance they'd be on my side.
Mm,
When this is the last battle, everybody on Earth should be involved, but you didn't invite them
mhm.
as the Emerald seat because they might not be on your side. You are a selfish POS, okay? Sorry. This should have been everybody involved and let the best prevail.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. So
I did like
right
the little
after,
moment where Rand and Radrin confront each other. Did you get that little bit where he's like inspecting him?
I'm just getting to that.
Okay, and
Okay,
he says you're not
so
him. Yeah, so he thought
exactly.
he was Demandred. That's where he thought Demandred was hiding.
I
Yeah.
may be reading too much into this, but so the on page 154 of the first edition here is when Godwin points out, "Oh my gosh, look at that." And Egwene is going, you know what, the Dominique? No, no, look. And it's the flag of Rodran or Mirandi, which, you know, whichever it is I didn't remember it being a red bull, and bad dad joke, or red herring.
Yeah.
Maybe it should have been a fish, because now I did want to point this out because this was a fun payoff, because um it was a long running theory of who the heck is Demandred, and probably the number one amongst the fan community, you know, as far as popularity would have been Tamandred. But there were a lot of people, especially when you start to hear about him, but we never meet him, about, oh, he styles himself as this, you know, great general, you know, that, oh, that must be Demandred because he wants a seat of power. And he, you know, Mirandy's right in the middle, so he'd be able to put himself right in the middle. Jordan had said on multiple occasions he put in red herrings on purpose.
Hmm.
There were a number of things that were there just to be a red herring, partly for story reasons and partly because the jerk was a sadist sometimes when
Yeah.
it came to tormenting the fans.
You
So
know,
I did like
this is
that
no
moment.
spoiler at this point because this discussion was one in those 1998 in the dorm rooms where you were starting to finally hear about this stuff. My theory back then was actually he was the one who overthrew the Shanshan Empire while the Daughter of Nine Moons was in
Hmm.
Randland. And so that was what I was going with. I thought he was going to be the new Shanshan army while the good ones were distracted, you
And
know.
it also that also made a lot of sense because of that cabal that he had created with Simmerhaj and Masana.
Mhm.
And if Simmerhaj is with the Daughter of the
Simmerhaj
Nine
takes
Moves, and then yeah,
the
yep,
good the ones that wouldn't follow across the sea while he did his thing in yeah,
yeah.
that was my theory back in 1998. It turned out to not be correct, but it was I thought that should have been a good runner in
Mhm.
the theory land stuff. But we'll find out here in a few pages where he actually is.
All
But
right.
it's not
So
Rodrin.
nope. All right, so page 156, 157 in my copy here is when Rand is walking up, and
Yes.
he
That's my
and
meta note. I even wrote it sideways so it was different than the other ones. Yeah.
um one of the things that Egwene says out loud that just made me forehead slap myself was when he's walking up and the grass is greening around him. And she says, I'd give good coin to know how he does that. And then her and Godwin are speculating on, is this a weave? You know, what is this?
Because
Or,
Egwene continually puts the worst ideas in his head. She's trying to find motive that isn't there.
yes.
This is cross-sex mind reading here in its at its best because sometimes a guy does something because it just seems like the best idea at the time, or it was just there.
Mhm.
But the woman is trying to find out the why. Why did you do this? Did you do
What?
this because of
Yep.
that? But you hate me. You're doing this because you hate me. And he's not even thinking about her other than that she's another
But
person there.
it's worse than that, because remember just earlier in the book when she's talking with Elaine and Nynaeve, and she's showing them these commentaries on the cycle that she's been studying very carefully. These what are considered to be the authoritative commentaries on the prophecies, and one of the prophecies is that the dragon is one with the land and the land is one with the dragon. you should know what's going on. This
Mhm.
is a great example of ought versus is, because to your point, what she's attributing motive, almost
Well,
always the worst possible motive, because this is what ought, and it will not let her see what is.
well, we will go back to the founding fathers of the United States. Keyword fathers. They very specifically wrote into the Constitution and every legal document we go by a very difficult path to proving motive in the court of law. Perjury is really hard to prove because
Mm-hmm,
perjury is
mm-hmm.
lie, not spoke the wrong thing. And
Yes.
lie is I did it on purpose. And murder one versus manslaughter or murder two is motive. And it is very complicated in the court of law to prove motive on purpose because of this, because people will assign motive and want it to
Mm-hmm.
be true.
Speaking of motive, another statement she has here that had made me give myself my 17th concussion hitting myself in the head was, he's grown into quite the showman. How many times have you, Egwene, literally thought about the pageantry of your office
Well, it's
and how
projection.
important that is?
It's
Yeah,
projection. He has hit a mental state as the person who's one with the environment that when he steps on something, it turns green.
yeah. And this was my question to you and Scott is, I think I've said this before, but was she always this bad and I just didn't see it? Or is this Sanderson's? Is this
This is
Sanderson being over the top and or inconsistent with her?
okay, so yes and no. This is cranked up to 11. So yes, there was hints of it all along and we've been trying to tell you the whole time. But it's just like the Game of Thrones, the protagonist lady, the dragon lady. Everybody's like, "Oh, she went mad in one episode." I'm like, "No, there was this moment and then there was this moment and then there was this moment and then there was this moment. She was a horrible person the whole time. She just did it for good reasons." And Egwene's been that way too. She's been a horrible person the whole time for good reasons in her mind.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it cranked up to 11 here. So,
These
but
couple
also
of pages
this is
really,
where
I mean,
Sanderson comes in
yeah.
though. I think he's trying to make her the good guy, but I don't think he gets it.
See, this is no, I had the exact opposite thought of, did, did
I think this
Sanderson
is Sanderson coming out.
was
I think this
was
is him thinking he's the good guy.
no, I was wondering, was Sanderson one of those fans that never liked Egwene and now he's taking the piss, as the Brits would say, and is he making her worse? Is he trolling me? Is
Watching
he
his
doing this on
interviews and his
purpose? Is
personality, I think he thinks this is the good thing.
really, because I haven't watched very
Because
many,
look at
and
the end result. She kind of
yeah,
turned him around on a lot of things in this whole thing.
yeah.
Using Elaine against him, using all of these things. So I think he was trying to make the girls the fixers of everything.
Mm,
Avienda
mm,
making him change the deal. Perrin comes in, which he always loved Perrin. So Perrin is his guy to use to help fix things too. And
mm,
Perrin kind of sided with the girls in a way that was like, yeah, you're right on some things, but you got to do it in another way.
yeah.
Mm. And so I think this was his moment where he thought he was. I might be projecting here too, where he thought where he was making the girls the hero here.
So here's one of the instances that kind of broke me and made me think, is he turning her into from an unsympathetic to a villain? This of was he as a fan an Egwene hater and now he can really turn the screws? Was when he comes up, Rand stood facing her, arms behind his back. Um, Mother, he said, nodding his head. So he would pretend respect, would he? Oh, come on, she can't possibly be this bad, can she? And she's certainly this bad in this moment. And it's like every sentence just keeps getting worse and worse. And I'm going,
You
I know
might be
she had
right.
her
You might be right. I don't know.
I
It
know
just
she had her
yeah.
unsympathetic moments, but this is just holy crap, man. I don't know if it, to your point, does he think that is this his take, Sanderson's take on how you make a strong female character? Is this him not getting the character and he's basically matting Egwene here, with how clumsily he's done Matt? Or is this, oh no, he thinks she is the bad guy and he's turning it up to 11 because, oh, what the hell, man? Come on.
Yeah, you might be right that I don't know. It's hard to get in someone's head. Maybe we can find an interview or
Here,
something somewhere. But
here's where I'm going to jump forward real quick. And then if you have other notes, we can back up. At the very end of this chapter, right before, there's this twist that upends everything. At the very end of this chapter, you get this, and again, credit where it's due. Sanderson writes the way this meeting falls apart and turns into a shouting match. Peter Jackson was able to cheat because he's using a visual and audio medium.
mhm.
When the meeting at the in fellowship starts to fall apart and everyone's standing up and pointing fingers and shouting at each other, he does this great camera work with the angles, and you've got the music kind of adding to the atmosphere so that you can not quite perfectly hear what everyone's saying as everyone's shouting over each other, and just using words on a page. Sanderson does a very good job of conveying that feeling of you feel like you are there and everything's falling apart. And there's this moment at the very end here, just the last page of the chapter, where um first Egwene, uh, whether Rand is doing this on purpose or not, he's basically exerting his will in the tent and it is swaying people. No, Egwene said loudly, her voice breaking the air. No, Rand al'Thor, we will not be bullied into signing your document, blah, blah, blah. And then everything goes to hell. And Egwene thinks, oh, shoot, and she has this thought of where is it? Of there had to be a way to stop this, to salvage it. You started this.
Mhm.
This is again what makes me what was kind of the period at the end of my thought of, was Sanderson trying to make her out to be the villain because she does all of this and then she realizes, oh, oopsie, I may have just screwed things up. Well, I don't know that she realizes I may have screwed things up, but she does realize, oh crap, things are getting bad here. This is about to
Mhm.
spiral out of control.
Well, and you see, this is another good example. We talked about it in the last episode of what happens when different sexes take the power dynamic, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to do what he thinks is right for the world. She's trying to get the upper hand. There's a difference between those two things. Now, she's trying to do it in her mind because she thinks she knows what's right for the world, but
Yep.
she's playing power and he's saying, no, this is what is. And this is realistically, he should have done the blacksmith analogy right here. This is Perrin was right. Explain it to her this way, because
Mm-hmm.
there's
Mm-hmm.
also a bunch of other people in the room that would have got it. This is where Perrin was actually right. He should have used that. But no, they're just fighting back and forth, and he's going for this is this is the way this should be, and I'm the one that's got to die for it,
Yeah.
and I don't want to die for nothing, is what
Yeah.
he's saying. And she's saying, I need the power so things can be the way that we think they should be. And she even talks about it. She does the appeal to authority with knowledge. At the bottom, it's 170 for me, but it's a couple pages from the end where she's like, it's the only information we have, Rand, when he's talking about Aes Sedai speculation
Mm-hmm.
on what would happen if the board was open again momentarily. And she's like, it's the only information we have. We know more than anybody else, is what she says.
No, you don't.
No, you don't. You don't
There's a
even know your own lore, really.
there's a 500-year-old man standing in front of you. You Luce Theron was Rand was there when the boar was created.
Mhm.
Rand was literally the one who patched the boar. You don't know more. And he's telling you, I was there when there was no patch.
Yeah,
I was there when there
which is
were no
something he actually
seals.
didn't say, and this is where she keeps cutting him
That's a
off.
good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
But he should have said, Aes Sedai speculation, period. I made the seals and I know what's wrong with them.
Hmm.
I know what mistake I made. And he doesn't say that right here.
Yeah, well, because she basically she talks about him bullying us, and she basically bullies him into this corner when he's trying to explain, because yes, he doesn't know exactly what will happen when the seals are broken. He can't know, but he does know for a fact, and no one else in this room does, what things were like last time. Did you have any more thoughts on chapter 5?
No, I think we've beat Egwene to death here.
And then I do. So I did have this thought, and I almost didn't want to say it because this might be too harsh. But before we move on, in thinking about it after the fact and wondering, okay, why does so much of what happens here in chapter 5 rub me the wrong way? And what I likened it to was, I think it was the second to the last episode of the first awful season of the awful show, where there's this moment where the two rivers people are all together, and they have this shouting match. They basically all start fighting with each other, and it was such contrived teen drama CWBS.
Mm-hmm.
None of it was natural. None of it was organic. It was we need this dramatic moment where everything falls apart right before the end. And that's what this felt like. And again, I almost didn't want to say it because for all our problems with Sanderson, it is not that bad. Okay. The
No,
show is
no, no.
god awful. But I do feel like some of both Egwene and Rand's attitudes towards each other and reactions to each other in the argument was there was contrived. It was a little too much or a lot too much, so that we could have this great moment at the beginning of chapter 6 when the room suddenly goes quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And it I just feel like Jordan would have found a way to make it more organic and
I,
thus more
I
satisfactory.
Well, I think it got better a little bit because we've talked about this before. Sanderson writes people better through other people's perspective.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we switch to Perrin's perspective. And so
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing the fight happen from an outside observer versus from internal thoughts. Because the reason we know how horrible she is here is because we're getting her thoughts.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know, if we had seen that exact same argument from parents' perspective the whole time, we wouldn't have made half the comments we did
But
because we know her motive. Assigning motive, we just talked about how it's so hard, but when you give me her thoughts, we know it.
what would have been a really interesting perspective for this chapter, and I think he writes her pretty well from the little bit that he's done, is Cadsuan.
Yeah, that would have been good.
Because she is the closest thing to a neutral observer in this moment.
Hmm.
She
Or even Nynaeve's perspective would have been good because she is protective over both of them.
yeah, that's true too. He writes her pretty well, and she is kind of stuck in the middle between Egwene and Rand.
She would have her,
Of
she would have her bias that she's been really with Rand a lot lately and did
mhm,
amazing things with him, like cleanse the taint.
yeah,
But also, she would have the Two Rivers Village Circle versus the women's group, and that bias to want to back Egwene. So she would have been a good perspective
yeah,
there because you could even have had thoughts of this is like when Sen did this to Mare Alvear, that kind of thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but then also her protectiveness of the Two Rivers and the Two Rivers people, of the thoughts of, oh, this is about to, spin out of control and create a feud, like when,
Mhm.
you know, Farmer Smith was arguing with Farmer John about their fence line, and it came to blows, and and wanting to bridge that divide. But I think the reason I would say Cadsuan would be better is because we switched to Perrin here, and that's a lot of what he does in this moment is Perrin the builder, Perrin the peacemaker.
Hmm.
of I got to find a way to get Rand and Egwene from forgetting that they're adults and they're the two most powerful people in the world right now, and they're shouting at each other like it's Beltane 3 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, but the great moment is when Moraine comes in and just steps, steps right back into where she was when we last saw her, only even more so because she had had a traumatic moment that had led to a kind of self-actualization, and now that has been enhanced by a very serious trauma
Hmm.
that she has had to live through.
Well, and I think it's a trauma related to the thing I sent you yesterday, and isomorphic, and Scott, you tell us what you think about this. My first thought rereading through this was, okay, so we have let me frame this. We have her change coming out of the rings in Rydian because she realized she was grasping something she should have been guiding.
Mm-hmm.
And so she changed her tune to go, okay, I swear that I'm going to be this way to you. And all of a sudden Rand opened up to her because she had that moment in the rings. And
Mm-hmm.
I think she, reading this, I think she was fighting something she knew all along. Because as I was going down the list of things where she's saying, this is the prophecy, but this is the fact now, and there's three of them, three big
Mm-hmm.
ones. I think these were her original three questions in the first doorway. And and I think she went in there and asked about the prophecies in a very careful way, because she does say you have to be careful about asking about things of the
Mm-hmm.
power, but none of these are actually power associated. They're meta topics. And all of a sudden, because of her traumatic experience, she's like accepted the fact that, oh, well, this is what all of this means. Those crazy answers they gave me weren't what I thought they were, especially now that I've spent some quality time with these people.
Yeah. Well, the first words out of her mouth, Rand says, "How the wheel weaves as the wheel wills, Rand. Have you forgotten that? Not as you will, Dragon Reborn," she said gently. "Not as any of us will. Perhaps one day it will weave itself out of existence. I do not believe that day is today, nor a day soon." And then you also get this great Moraine moment because it is one of those things that kind of clicks in hindsight, like when you watch a good, who done it or heist movie, and then at the very end they show you how it actually happened, and you go, "Ah, I get it now. I get what that scene meant." And it's when Rand says, "You haven't answered my question." "But I have," Moraine replied fondly. "It just was not the answer you wanted." Because earlier Moraine would not have given that explanation, but that's what she's been doing all along. When she's being mysterious, it's no, she's answering your question. She's just not giving you the answer you were wanting, or I would also add expecting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, did you have more specific points on the to Moraine's questions and how you think what's going on here is her revealing what her questions were in the doorway?
No, it just gave me that feeling, and
Mm-hmm.
and the number fit too. Just being three big revelations that she brings forward. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and it just so happens that it's right when the world needs it.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Well, that was an interesting thought because I'd never considered that of, oh, huh. She's because what jumped out at me is when she starts citing prophecy
Hmm.
to answer all of these, especially to Egwene's um uh arguments and her obstinacy against Rand. And the thought I had as the so-called Christian conservative of the group is, if you want to make most believers with a capital B uncomfortable, just cite scripture to them. Because, one of your favorite songs, one of your favorite artists, I Cast No Stones. I love
Hmm.
that song.
I thought you were
I
gonna say Amazing Grace. As a non-believer, I love that song. It's
especially when you know the history of it, of where the
yeah.
the writer of that song came from and what his biography was. But
But yeah, I
um,
cast no stones. I actually had to explain that. Ben was like, "What does that mean?" He was like
mhm.
10, and I explained the whole song to him, and he was like, "Oh, that makes sense."
Yeah, exactly. Of you know you you pointing your fingers at me, and I mean we can have a fight if you want. You get your Bible, I'll go get mine, and then you might not like what I have to say, but it's going to be right out of the word. And that's Egwene is, well, we can't do this because, and she just quotes scripture to her and shuts her up.
Hmm.
And again, back to the previous chapter of where it seemed over the top to me is you were just like elbow deep in the scripture, in the prophecies, trying to find the answers, except you weren't actually trying to find the answers. This is one of the biggest traps of any research paper. If you ever have to write as a youngster, as a high schooler, as but especially when you get into college, you cannot go looking for things to support your argument. You just have to go looking for facts first. But if you're reading your sources with a preconceived notion, then all you're going to find are the things that support what you already thought. And it's going to leave you blind, and you're going to risk looking like an idiot when someone points out, well, wait, what about that? What about that thing that you just skimmed right over because it didn't support your thesis?
I okay, so there's one that kind of threw me off, but I'm gonna skip it for just a second. The next line, uh, to oh no, no, never mind. Ah, I misread that. Sorry. It the first time I read it, and now just reading it, about to read it out loud, I would have made a mistake. It, I thought Darlin finished it for her, Lord Darlin, but
Mm,
it says to Darlin, pray
mm.
that the heart of stone remembers tears. But the one before that, so I misread that, and I almost made a statement that would have been stupid. So disregard all of the hello. But when she says to Perrin and Barrelane, and the very skies bow, Barrel is that the bird reference with Fail and Barrelane as eagle and falcon, or that's the only one that didn't make sense there? Because why Perrin in the skies bowing, and why Barrelane involved? Because the other ones made sense. The seas give way for the sea folk, the mountains and the borderlanders, pride with Gregorin, Darlin the stone of Tyr because he's the king of Tyr.
That's a good question. I'm not sure.
I did
Um,
my mind first went to the whole thing that revolves around the falcon and the eagle with Perrin,
mhm.
but why not look at Fail and Barrelane instead
Yeah.
of Perrin and Barrelane? Yeah, Fail was there. He said they said Perrin walked in with Fail.
Yeah, yeah, she is. Um, I don't know. I don't know if that's on purpose or if that's just the, the including everyone in the room and making sure to drive the point home by catching everyone's eye. I don't know. I'll have to ruminate on that one because I certainly don't have a thought right off the top of my head. Um, so then we get to Avienda piping up. Uh,
Yeah, which the result of that is where my comment is, not what she said. What she said is actually
mhm. What she
legitimate,
said,
especially since we got the setup from
yeah,
her visions and writing. But
what she said is, you know, what what she's saying is the good times make weak men parable or saying, right? Is that we're going to become weak,
mhm.
uh, and you're going to make that worse. You're going to create that condition. But what were your thoughts on this? Is was it, oh, the solution is what you had a
Yeah,
thought on?
the solution is, didn't the Isle just become what the White Cloaks thought they were?
Yes, but better because to Elaine's point about what you need legal mechanisms here that people will respect. The reason people didn't respect the White Cloaks is because their legal mechanism was might makes right.
Well, the reason that's a big deal to me though is because we had an opportunity with a new White Cloak leader
That's
who
a good
is a
point.
family of someone who is a ruler and is actually
Yeah,
a
yeah.
super reasonable, just person
Hmm.
to help set the framework for that for the White Cloaks. You could have reinvented the White Cloaks in the image of the mediator, the mitigator, the just, the actual just. The we don't have a country bias.
Hmm.
And Gallad was the perfect person to do that with.
Yeah, the White Cloaks kind of get forgotten about as far
Yeah.
as what the heck happens to them after all of this. Because it seems like we're setting something up with Galad becoming the leader of the we're gonna have to have a new White Cloak way of thinking, of doing things, of being, and I don't know that we ever get any kind of epilogue on what the heck happens to them. Um,
I need to pause this for a second. Hold
okay. All right. So moving on, the the way this the the reason this works ultimately is is twofold that I find important is first of all, Perrin being the one to kind of salvage things here and figure out the way to bridge some of these divides of Perrin the builder, Perrin the blacksmith. I don't want to skip over that because I think that is a good payoff of you know Perrin saying, "Hold on a second, Rand, come here," and so they
It
talk
still would have been fun
privately and
because Sanderson does the banter. This would have been a good spot for it because he could have been taken Rand aside and been like, should have used the blacksmith reference.
well, no, I mean he does kind of do that though because
Well, he kind of does it, but it could have been like a actual point where he just makes a funny.
well, uh Rand says on page 174, this isn't about blacksmithing, Perrin. And Perrin's response is, of course it is, which I love on multiple levels. So to me, that works great and is a great payoff for a long running setup of Perrin the builder, Perrin the blacksmith. And
Mhm.
he's the one who kind of sees the solution for the Aiel, which is well, they're tools, and you don't want them growing dull. They don't want themselves growing dull. You need to find a place for them, and this solves multiple problems. It solves their problem with being left out, and it solves the problem. Elaine is some of the problems Elaine and the others are bringing up. Um, but
Which is funny
ultimately,
that it's the solution though, because Rand has actually done this already. He
hmm,
used the Aiel as the
good point.
forces of justice in Karhine and Camelin, and Elaine hated it. And now she's accepting it as the grand solution. That is like, oh, this is going to fix everything. No, that was actually the thing you hated most about what Rand did in your country because your people won't respect outside influence.
I think what's changed here though is to her point early on is not now we have a official mechanism here.
Mm-hmm.
So the Aiel are no longer outsiders because they are part of this treaty system. But 177 for me here is Moraine. Actually, I shouldn't skip over Egwene getting slapped down a little bit more because it's funny. Is mother? She's saying to her, "You're a dreamer. What have you dreamed?" And again, to the citing scripture to believers, if you want to annoy them, is, "Hey, what have you dreamed? Say it, say it." And
Mm-hmm.
Egwene has this moment of, "I don't want to say it because I just realized I'm about to prove myself wrong." So I love the way Moraine, but it's not all Egwene. Rand kind of gets slapped down here too, which I appreciate because on page 177, um, he says when she's talking about the seals, and you need to turn them over to Egwene because she's the watcher of the seals, and you're going to be busy. Of After she's convinced Egwene, yeah, you're going to break them. You've dreamed it, mother. Of I don't like this, Moraine, he said. Then not much has changed, has it? She asked lightly. I believe you have often resisted doing what you are supposed to, particularly when I am the one to point it out to you. He paused for a moment, then laughed, reaching into the pocket of his coat. I like that moment because, as I said, it's not just picking on Egwene, it's Moraine doing what she needs to do for both of them because yeah, they're both kind of being stubborn stupid. Egwene is obviously much worse, but they're both being kind of stubborn stupid. But the other reason I like it is because she's able to say that out loud now, and she knows she can. And the reason Rand and Moraine have become perfect partners in this moment is because they both know themselves better than they ever have before.
Mm.
And that lets them, in much the same way that Perrin can talk to Rand and Rand can talk to Perrin in ways that they can't talk to others because they've been friends for literally as long as they can remember. So you
Well,
can
and this knowing is different too, because I'm not going to speak for Moraine, but I'll speak to Egwene and Rand. He doesn't want to give her the seals because she has said, I will not break them.
mm,
She keeps putting thoughts in his mind that he never specified himself. And she's been wrong about them all. Yeah, he may be wrong in this meta point that she's not going to break them when the time comes that Moraine is convincing him of. But
mm-hmm.
his motive for not wanting to give them to her is because she actually said, I won't do it. In fact, I will try to stop you from doing it. Where and Moraine's trying to comfort him into the no, no, she's actually going to see eventually the right way of things. And he has to actually disassociate from reality to trust Moiraine, where Egwene is creating situations in her head that don't actually really exist to make her decisions.
Mm.
So that's the difference between the two. And that's, I think, why we like one versus the other. It's not because he's boy, it's because he's making decisions based on what's the evidence. She's making decisions based on what she thinks is true
Or wants to be true.
or wants to be true or just her own paranoia, realistically, of motive.
Yeah. Um, then to wrap things up, um, we get a switch to Lan where his small army of Borderlanders is holding Tarwin's Gap, but not for much longer. They're just about done. They've been pressed pretty hard, and first the bad, which was that right at the beginning there, which is 181 in my copy. Lan says, "What I wished was selfish. I came to die for Melchior. I had no right to deny that privilege to others." Which was our big gripe of why we called it a mini slog, his storyline from the end of Knife of Dreams through here. It was a mini slog because he should have known that, at least on some level, and 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 we should have seen a progression to this point rather than him just being stubborn, stupid, and then okay, fine, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, now that we're
Raise the
all about
golden
to
ring.
die.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
here we go.
Um, but then there are some just the scene itself plays out very well. I love it. I love the guy can obviously write, as evidenced by his, copious library of work. And there's some great prose here. For instance, a couple pages later, who is it who says this? Uh it's Onder who's wounded and dying, and Lan tells him to go join the wounded. Um and his response, I love this response. At the top of page 183, we've already moved the mountain, Lan. let's budge this feather and be through with it. I love that line.
Mm-hmm.
Let's budge this feather and be through with it. And then the build up to the charge, and then we know what's going on because we got that hint there at the very end of Rand's scene when he says, first we need to go save my friend
Mm-hmm.
of with these others coming in, but so we the reader knows what's going on, and I love the way he writes Land's perspective of kind of seeing this on the edge of his vision, but not knowing what's going on. And it was so good, it made me think of two of my favorite moments in all of cinema, which the most well known being the Battle of Pelennor Fields in Return of the King, when I just brain farted on his name. He just recently Bernard Hill, who just played that character perfectly, and he's the one who kind of came up with how that scene worked there, where he's giving the rousing speech and he just starts shouting death, and everyone, yeah, we're looking down this hill. We all know we're going to die, but we're charging anyway. Let's go. And he rouses his troops by shouting death. And then the criminally underrated, "Lo, there do I see the light of my people. Back to the beginning." 13th Warrior, one of my
Oh
favorite
yeah.
cult classics ever.
13th
Of
Warrior is amazing.
that climax of giving the Viking, prayer for the dead, as the bad guys come charging in, and it is evocative of that, um which, so kudos to Sanderson, but also kudos to, or uh something of an explainer for why things like the awful series piss us off so much, is because, yeah, we love the books, and to us the books are practically perfect, so why do you need to turn it into, well, because there are moments like this where, as awesome as it is in your head, you would like to see it well done. On the as much as I, however many times I read Lord of the Rings and saw it in my head, and yet it was the Battle of Pelennor Fields was so epic, cinematic, monumental, that I loved it from
Well,
the
and
moment I saw it.
in the complaints about these last few books is you have that, but you also have, to go to Return of the King, the moment where Legolas surfs down the Oliphant's trunk, you
Yeah.
know, and you're like, oh God, was that even? Oh, Legolas was cool enough shooting
Yeah.
his bow. You didn't need him to
You didn't
surf
need
down an
that.
elephant's trunk. Or when he surfs a lot. He surfed down the shield in the Twin Towers, or the Two Towers, and was shooting his bow while he's surfing on a shield down the stairs. You didn't need that. You didn't need it. You
Mm-hmm.
had Pelennor Fields, and then you had surfing down a trunk.
That's a good
That's the
point.
way Sanderson's writing is you have a good moment and you're like, yeah, all right, cool. And then something that's Jar Jar Binks
Mm-hmm.
jumping the shark. And it's, yeah.
Well, that finishes up chapter 6. We have a little time. Do we want to push on to 7, or go ahead and leave it there?
I am not studied up past
Okay, then
6. So
then let's save it, because there's some, um it 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 basically, it opens with, it's an Elaine point of view, and so that's important because she's been named the single leader, um and we didn't really talk about that in the moment when it happened, so we talk about it more next time, when we get her point of view, and stuff happens. And then I don't have a ton of notes on I have a fair bit on chapter 7, but then it actually starts to get into the battles of the last battle, and so we may be able to push through a fair number of chapters next time.
yeah, and this is going to be a difficult section for me because the great thing about Jordan was he actually understood battle because
Hmm.
he'd been there. So you can actually feel that in his writing. And Sanderson is very descriptive about his
Yes.
battles, and he's written a lot of fantasy novels with battles in them. But okay, so I was just at the Country Western Bar on Friday, And there was a guy, everything's a line dance now, by the way. This is horrible. I don't know what it's like in Russia, but here in the States, you don't dance with anybody anymore. Everybody just goes out and
Mm.
semi dances. Well, there was one guy there, and we're right next to NASA. I would guess he works there just from my analysis of the situation for to kind of set the stage here. But I feel bad for the guy because he probably wants to meet women and bond with them and everything, and everybody line dances now. So he's like, you know what? I'm going to learn how to do this. And seemingly, appearance wise, looked like a very anal guy, retentive guy. So he had every step correct, but it still looked so wrong because there was no feeling behind it. It was just I have to make this step, this step, this step, this step, turn, da, 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 da. And it was just, it was why I'm not scared of AI because he was like a robot out there. Every step was perfect, but it just didn't look like he was dancing.
That is a great kind of tease because there is a perfect moment in chapter 9. I was just scrolling through my notes to remind myself where it was, where it switches back to Land's point of view, and there is a perfect moment for the difference between Sanderson and Jordan and the way they write things by uh by conveying the emotion and the feelings of the men and women who are there, contrasted with the trying to convey the emotion by pulling you into the scene by description so that you feel like you're there. And both can work, but Jordan's way will be more impactful if you pull it off because you're creating an empathetic link to what is going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he was able to do that masterfully, as well as um I finally got around to watching the movie 1917 because it's on Netflix now, and I'd heard a number of people I follow who liked it, like Drinker and Nerdrotic loved it, and one of the things that jumped out at me, and I is because I watched it right after we were done recording last time, Wheel of Time recording, and we've talked about this before about the way Jordan was able to write a battle without a lot of action. And you didn't realize there wasn't a lot of action until
mm-hmm.
you think about it in hindsight. And you look at the previews for 1917. If you watch the trailer, if you think about this is a war movie, and so you might be expecting something like the opening to Saving Private Ryan. And Spielberg did that very purposefully to really punch you in the gut from the get-go. But Sam Mendes, the director for 1917, he does something very different. And there's not as much action in the movie as you might expect for a war movie. And in fact, the first action doesn't really happen until something like 30 minutes into the movie, but you don't realize it because from the very beginning, he really pulls you to the edge of your seat, and it's all through the characters. It's all through the characters and through the ambiance, the setting, and you keep leaning forward because you keep expecting something terrible to happen.
Well, but also in Saving Private Ryan, look at what they did with the cinematography. Sound was so important,
Mm-hmm.
where things would go quiet and it was muffled and it was you could hear it. You're looking through Tom Hanks's eyes theoretically, and everything's quiet, but you see the guy in shock go back and
Mm-hmm.
pick up his arm and start carrying it. And then it goes quiet again, and you see kind of vague scenes that aren't really pointed at anything. It's just people running. It's just sand flying up, and there's still the muffled sound. And
Yeah,
then you
yeah.
get another hit scene where somebody is blown up, and then it goes back to the disassociated quiet again. So they use sound to recreate shock, and that put emotion into the scene. It wasn't like a Marvel movie where
Mm-hmm.
there's just a lot of action going on. It was actually creating the emotion of shock. And that's what that scene was supposed to give you. It was supposed to put you in shock to set the stage for the rest of the movie. And yeah, there's a right and a wrong way to do it. If they had just shown a bunch of soldiers being blown up, it would have been different. But because they actually put you in that moment, like you were a bystander in that moment, who could have died at any time.
It's a good point, and it's a good analogy to kind of what we're complaining about here of Wheel of Time up through Knife of Dreams and then the last three books, because after Saving Private Ryan, there were a lot of movies that came out in the early 2000s that were trying to mimic it, and no one was able to capture it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because they didn't understand the subtleties, or if they did, they weren't able to replicate them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so the difference between Jordan and Sanderson to me is Jordan was so much better with setting the feeling versus just telling the acts. So
Mm-hmm.
Jordan is the guy who feels the music and dances to it, whereas Sanderson is the guy who knew all the moves,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
still just felt and looked wrong.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it and a good place to leave it. So we will see y'all next time for who the heck knows what social politics episode wise, and then next
When's the
week Wheel of
DNC?
Time.
When
Oh geez, I don't know.
it's coming
Here
up,
in a
isn't it?
couple, it's a couple weeks though. I think it's
Yeah, we might have to do the VP speculation on Kamala or announce who it is. So one of those will probably be on the docket. You still wanted to, did you want to continue the Lauren Southern thing, or did you get enough of that in
I got enough
for
of
this
that
one?
unless more, unless people want
Okay,
to talk more about that. But
there was something I was talking with somebody. Oh, it was manufactured consent around all this stuff. The old Noam Chomsky, the considering his politics, he basically told you what they do. It's the limited hangout kind of thing. So we might talk a
mm,
little bit of that and how that works on a psychological level because we're in the middle of it right now. So,
yeah, in the middle of a lot of crap. All right, well we will see y'all next time.
all right, later.